Fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. I'm here with Nikki. Today we're going to talk about strings, and you're going to learn about how different strings affect playability, different rackets and so on. You've been a stringer for a long time. We can start there.
Yep. So obviously I've been stringing for a good part of 20 years now, and I feel like recently there's been a bit more development or a little bit more emphasis on strings because of the balls, because of the surfaces. So you see players changing more strings, trying different stuff, and I feel like a lot of you might still be using the same strings or the same tensions that you're using before. So I thought we could just kind of go over a little bit of everything of why to use which tensions, different types of strings. Obviously there's a lot of different monofilaments, so it's not just like monos are stiff and synthetics are soft.
I give people a little bit more of information around strings, and I've seen like the videos I've done recently and how to choose a string and so on are like some of the most popular. I think people have a lot of questions because the choice is like endless.
Yes.
There's so many smaller brands coming out with polyester strings, and it's very difficult to know if it's going to be 6-sided, 8-sided, round. Should I go a softer one? Should I get a firmer one? What is should I go for a name brand or not so familiar brand? It's very difficult. So if we start with the topic of like power versus control. So if you want power, what kind of string should you go for?
So if you want a more powerful string, you want something that moves more freely, because obviously the more the strings move, the more elastic they are, the more power you're going to get. So obviously a stiffer string is more likely to bite into the ball and give you less power. And you can also obviously always compensate that with tension. So obviously the lower the tension, the more power you get, the higher the tension, the more control you get. And that's like obviously very broad. And then within that, you obviously can get strings that will give you more spin, more feeling, more control. You can also, obviously we can talk about hybrids as well in polys.
Yeah, you can mix two polys, or you can mix a poly and a gut string, or a poly and a multifilament string. So all these extra combinations can scramble up your brain. Like, what should I put in the mains? Should the mains have higher tension than the crosses? Some players do it the opposite way around. It gets very, very, not I would say complicated, but you need to experiment a little bit.
Yeah, you do need to try a little bit. And I would say as like a general rule, you would always want to put the stiffer string in the mains. As just a general, the only time that doesn't really apply is when gut goes in the mains. But that's just something you need to try, and we'll kind of leave that on its own. But otherwise, you always want to put the stiffer string in the mains. For example, a good example is Casper Ruud, who's using Polytour Spin in the mains and Polytour Pro in the crosses. And there you have obviously a hybrid polyester setup. Two similar strings, but also very different. One is designed to be stiffer. It's 6-sided, I think. And whereas Polytour Pro is made to be a little bit softer, it's rounder, it moves a little bit easier, and therefore gives you a little bit more control.
So that those like combining two string hybrids is becoming more and more popular, but it adds complexity because you don't need to know how you can experiment with them, and like the base knowledge, as you said, like putting the round string in the crosses is usually a good idea because it's a bit more slippery. So you allow the main strings to move a bit more, which kind of give you a bit more spin, you know.
Exactly, because obviously the one thing people I think often forget is when they look at a tennis racket, it's this way up. So you have the mains and the crosses, but obviously when you're hitting, it's that way. So it's actually the mains that are the ones giving you the spin. Even though when you obviously look at a racket, it feels,
makes no sense.
It doesn't make sense, but obviously we're always hitting, the racket's always parallel to the ground. So it's actually the main strings that are the ones that bite into the ball, and it's the crosses that give you a little bit more elasticity. And then we have obviously like a term used a lot is snapback, so strings that give you a lot of snapback. Generally, what snapback is just how much a string is able to move freely and then return back to its position. Which obviously is super important, because if it just moved freely and didn't return, then you'd have no elasticity in the string, and vice versa. If it didn't move at all, you wouldn't really get any spin or power from the string. But necessarily, strings with a lot of snapback don't make them better or worse. It's just like a term for how much a string can move.
And it's all a matter of taste. Some players love dead response, like the string feels like a brick, like a paddle racket, there's not much movement, and some can control a really low tension or very elastic string bed where you have a lot of trampolining, like there's a lot of movement going on in the strings, but they have good timing, maybe shorter swing, so they can control that movement, you know. So that's also something you have to know about yourself, like what do I like, you know, and experiment, like try maybe a softer string, lower tension, and then go for a stiffer string, higher tension, and see like what do I prefer.
Yeah, and I think generally the trend lately has been sort of a shift over to softer strings, or at least a stiff string in the mains and a softer polyester in the crosses, because balls have got heavier, slower courts, conditions are just generally tougher.
Yep.
So you do see a lot of players sort of shifting over to softer strings, and not that many people are shifting back to gut or over to gut of the younger generation, because obviously before, if you wanted a little bit softer feeling, you'd go to gut, whereas
Yep.
nowadays I feel like the younger players are just looking for more of a hybrid polyester setup. You don't really see any of the young guns.
Like the youngest guys like Shelton and like that generation, Mensik, Shelton, and it's rare. You think you might still see it, but it's rare, and I think you can get kind of the playability you're looking for, and especially since they swing so fast,
Yeah.
and usually they use kind of all of them semi-western to western grips. I think the gut then has maybe a little bit less role in their setup
I
than
think you
for
need
like
to keep the
Medvedev,
ball
for
and the
example.
strings a lot longer to be using a gut setup.
And there's also gauge. I wanted to mention that before. So the thicker the string, the more control, the more durability, it will last longer. A lot of pros use 130, or I mean, Rafa used 135 in the past. But now you can get gauges down to 1.05, which is ultra thin, you know, and then the durability won't be very good, but it's very soft and it's quite powerful. So if you're like a senior player and you want to try polyesters, you can go softer string in general, but also a thinner string.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you're not breaking regularly, go down to the thinnest string you can in what you feel is a decent amount of durability. You know, so there's no point of you playing with a 130 string that lasts you 6 months if you're playing twice a week.
No.
You know, you do need to be breaking strings, because otherwise the strings will die.
Yeah.
You know, they'll just
You
go
should
dead.
be replacing strings like semi-frequently, like whatever you can afford, but generally it's not good to cheap out on the restringing.
No. And then also worth noting, obviously, the thicker the gauge of the string, the tighter the string bed will feel at the same tension. So 125 strung at 24 kilos will feel looser than 130 strung at 24 kilos as well.
It's a very good point.
Yeah.
One of the biggest topics, I mean, I think it started all with maybe Rafa, you know, it's all about spin. Everybody talks about spin. There's spin rackets, spin strings, shaped strings, sometimes triangular strings that really cut into the ball, or square-shaped strings are very popular. Like, how do you get spin from a string? And many say, okay, you get spin from the stroke, which is true, but can you get more bite from a shaped string? What are your thoughts around this?
So there's been like both sort of research done, like, and there's not really been a conclusive evidence that rough or edge string actually helps spin. At the same time, it doesn't like say that it doesn't at all, but it doesn't really, it shows both. So obviously, like we mentioned before, the spin you actually get from the snapback and the strings being allowed to move and then snap back into place, and that's a lot of the time also what gives spin.
Yep.
Whereas it doesn't make a massive difference if the string is smooth or rough or 6-sided, 8-sided. The only thing you're going to do is reduce your durability mainly.
When the shapes wear out, yeah, because that
Exactly.
happens pretty fast on like a shaped string bed. If you have an aggressively shaped one, the string will end up being round at some point anyway, because we're going to hit that string bed. You know?
So I wouldn't be too focused on the shape of the string being your only sort of, okay, I want spin, I need to get, you know, the most aggressive feeling string I can.
Yeah.
You know, because there are strings that are smooth around RPM, for example, and that's because it's very stiff. So it like really bites into the ball. So when the ball hits the string bed, it grips that ball, and it doesn't matter if it's round or not, it's gripping the ball and it flings it back out.
Yeah. And also in the RPM Blast case, you can feel like the slipperiness of the string, and you can have like liquid wax coating, a heating, and all these things to make the string more elastic, more snapping back, which will also increase spin, probably more than shape. What some people will prefer with shape is that you might feel like the ball grips a little bit more. It doesn't increase spin, but it just like has a bit more grip on the strings, and that's something you can like or dislike. So that's a little bit more depending on what you feel and what you prefer. But I doubt that you will see in the data like that a shaped string. And I also went to the IsoSpeed factory in Eisenstadt and discussed this with someone who has worked producing strings for 20 years for big brands. And he said he didn't really believe in shape and spin.
No.
So you can have a feeling that you get more spin than you play with that.
The mental factor is there.
The mental factor should always be in there. It's like with colors, with everything. But I would not say you're going to get less spin from like all the power than like a 6-sided string if you hit the same ball. You know?
No. And how much does color affect strings?
This is interesting because like the guy at the factory, which I really respect, he said it's such a small part of the string that it's more of a mental thing. However, like when I tried, for example, the Tourline strings, I played today with Tourline Toro Tour in my E-Zone, and that was That's a shaped string. It's mint colored, looks great in the racket, plays really good. And they are Otoro spin strings, for example, like they are 5-sided. And the green one and the pink one are much more lively, in my opinion, than the white one, because the white has no additives, no coloring.
Yeah, yeah, I have the same feeling. For example, playing with Polytour Pro, obviously it comes in a whole array of colors, and I've played with it. I obviously always use the yellow one, which I think was also their original one.
Yep.
So anytime the original string, whatever the color is, gets a new color, they do have to adjust the string slightly. So the differences are minimal, but I do find that, for example, the dark gray black one is a lot stiffer than their classic yellow one.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel that too, 100%. So I think most people do. So I'm not sure that the colors will, that has have no effect. In my experience, and most people I talk to, they would say yes, it has an effect.
Yeah, so we were kicked off the tennis court because people use the tennis court for more than conversations, which I think is good. Nuisance, yes, of course. Comfort and feel, that's a very important topic with many of you guys probably listening to this, and we've all had it, experience some kind of discomfort. Usually arm discomfort, tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, wrist problems, shoulder issues, and how can you work with the string to mitigate and alleviate these kind of issues?
Yeah, I think one important factor always is that a lot of people are using the same strings that the pros are using.
Yep.
But obviously, and also rackets, but obviously without the power, training, technique, or
nothing of it really.
No reason to use them. There are so many good softer strings out there, and a lot of people are using too much mono filament rather than actually just using a nice multi-filament. A lot of the time, a lot of players, especially let's say the older generation, could really benefit a lot from using a really nice multi-filament. Your feeling is much better, the response is much better, the chance of you injuring yourself is much lower. And the quality of string generally is very good. There are some really good multi-filaments out there. So just because the pros are using a certain string also doesn't mean that you need to. And of course now there are coming more and more, let's say, comfort polys. One being obviously Yonex Polytour Pro, another one being Element from Luxlon, very good. Head links, the regular links.
Yep, that's a very comfortable one.
It's also a very comfortable string, and these are also great strings for juniors that are moving from sort of 11, 12 years old into like a hybrid or a full poly setup.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a bunch of strings I've tested that are soft. Isospeed Cream, for example, made in Austria, that's a good one. The Toro line strings are generally quite soft if you go with like Toro or Toro, but you're not the Tour string. So like if the string has Tour in it, maybe it's not for you. Like that would be a good point to keep in mind. Yeah, usually that is not the best way. And if you're going to use a very stiff string, you have to drop the tension quite a bit, or put it in a hybrid with a very soft string. So like a multi-filament or a cut, you know. So be careful with stringing too high, with using a RPM Blast stiff string at 55 pounds. That's it's a road to tennis elbow, pretty much. I've seen it so many times. I get these consultations all the time as do you. So it's like, don't do that to yourself. You know, make sure that you play with a comfortable setup and groove with that instead.
Yeah, definitely. The only downside from most comfort polys and multi-filaments for that matter is their tension maintenance isn't as good.
No.
But if it saves you having to go to a physio, stopping playing tennis or being in pain, then it's worth it. But they do drop tension, they do lose tension faster.
Yeah. You just need to restring more often, but that's anyway probably good.
Yes.
It's let's call it a luxury problem. Like I mean, you pay that €20, whatever it's $20 it is, and buy a reel of a softer string and make sure you're up on your restring, and you will have better spin, you will have better comfort, better feel, everything is going to be better. So don't skimp on that, you know, really that's not. And so Linko Mac 10, also a good new softer string, even used on tour, but definitely arm friendly.
Yes,
you know, for players.
Yeah, I mean, comfort or softer doesn't mean that it's not like a competitive string.
No.
You know, so it just has different properties.
Yeah, and like you have guys like Tiafo, 42 pounds, stringing like 19 kilos. Mandarino obviously is down in like the 10 kilos, but there are pros stringing very low, so you can also string low, but then it's up to you. But if you're gonna string a little bit higher, like let's say 50 pounds and above, then really go softer on the setup. Otherwise,
and I think nowadays also all rackets are so spin oriented, power oriented. Like how much spin do you really need?
No.
Like nobody's ripping the ball that much that they need a rough spin stiff string in a spin power racket. Like it's not necessary anymore. You know, so just rein it in, get something that works for you.
Durability versus performance. If we talk about trade-offs between tension maintenance and snapback and string life, where are you there? Like, what should you go in in the middle there? Should you try to go like, where should you be as a club player?
I think as a good club player, the probability that you don't string frequently enough is quite high.
Yep.
I would guess. So I would definitely aim for performance and comfort, and then adjust your stringing requirements or frequency from there. Because again, when a string goes dead, it doesn't absorb vibration the same way, it doesn't give you the same feedback, you're gonna have to, it loses obviously tension and general sort of snapback. It just becomes like, I mean, over exaggeration, but just comes dead, like rubber. You know, so it just absorbs like.
And you get nothing from the string,
back.
it doesn't
Yeah,
help
exactly.
you
You don't get
anymore,
anything
so
back.
then you need to replace it.
Yes, yeah. So definitely find a performance string that's comfortable for you, that helps you, and then, like I said, find the thinnest gauge that you can manage stringing wise. Obviously, even if you have unlimited funds, you don't want to be playing with 1.1 string in mains and crosses, because it would just be, you know, unnecessary. You'd be breaking every warm up. But obviously, don't use a 130 string if you're breaking every 4 months. Now, unless you're looking for a lot of comfort, don't string lower than 120, than a 1.2 gauge. But yeah.
Good point. All right, so there was a question here about the best types of strings or setups for different types of players. I generally think you can play with kind of whatever string that works, feels good for you. But obviously, if you're hitting like super heavy top spin, you know, with like a really under the ball always, you know, with a racket like this one, that's gonna affect you also a little bit, because like if you play with an arrow, they have a lot of string movement. The string's gonna be wear out quicker. Then if you play with a denser pattern, that's more maybe for flatter strokes. It's like a denser pattern gonna have less string wear. So the racket and your play style will have some effect on what string you should go
Of course, but there isn't like a cookie cutter setup that, okay, you like to play like this and this, well then use this setup. You know, you do have to experiment. You know, there are players that hit with a lot of spin using certain type, like softer strings. There are also players that hit very flat using very sort of stiff spin string.
You could say that, okay, if you're a old school feel serve and volley type player who like to feel the ball, the drop shots, you probably like a gut hybrid, like you maybe gut Alu Power, gut Polytour Pro, like a gut and a round string could be a very nice feeling, because you love that, how the sensation
and you want the ball
of
to stay on the string.
Exactly.
So you need to like adjust what the sensations you want, and then find the strings that you know, not just because of how you play, because you know you might want to feel the ball sort of really gripping the back of the strings. And fair enough, use a rough string. Or you want to just try and keep the ball on the strings because you like to feel the ball better, then obviously choose a softer, rounder string.
And if you're ripping the ball and you're breaking strings all the time, you will obviously need, and you probably have a very advanced player aspiring pro at this point, you probably need a little bit of a thicker 125, 130 string that is more durable. You know, Lynx Tour, RPM Blast, All the Power, these kind of strings. That's fine, you know, but that's a very specific player type. And I know many players listening are like maybe thinking that they rip the ball harder than they actually rip the ball. No offense, because we've all been in this boat. But
if you think it might be you, it's probably you.
Record yourself, ask your buddies or your coach, and maybe they can help guide you also in the right direction there. The hybrid setups, we talked about that before. Pros and advanced players mix two different strings, so that's kind of like putting two different ingredients in a dish, and you say, hey, I would think that this spice will work well with this
like
type
a sweet
of
and sour.
Exactly.
You can have both.
You try to make it taste what's this, umagi or
umagi string.
Umagi string. I remember like that word umami, the word in Japanese for that perfect mix, right? And that's something you can look for in strings. It might lead you down a long rabbit hole. So like if you see Casper Ruud using Polytour Pro and Polytour Spin, that could be a good mix to try, you know, for best of both worlds. But it's and also like the pros standard gut 4G crosses or Alu crosses, that's tend to be quite nice. It's a bit firmer, but it tends to be nice.
It's going to be nice,
tension, what happens when you string lower or when you string higher, and where should most people be?
I mean, you don't want to be going too extreme either end, but you do want to be staying on the lower side these days because, again, like we said, sort of conditions are getting heavier, tougher. You're also not using new balls all the time, so you do want to, but again, if you're not stringing that frequently, then also it might be worth taking into consideration that you know, if your strings are lasting you 3 weeks, then how you string them on day one and how you play with them on week 3 is also not the same. But I mean, anywhere sort of below the 25 kilo mark, 55 pound mark is probably a good place to start, you know, and then nothing under 18 kilos. What's that?
No, that could be quite extreme. I usually like to, if players don't feel like they have an idea, they're lost completely in the jungle with string and racket, we're getting into rackets here as well, is that I usually recommend get like a Speed MP or Nordic Dots Model 100, like a 100 square inch in between racket, not a power racket, not a spin racket, and string it at 50 pounds. That's 22.5 kilos. And then you are in the middle of everything, and from there you will try to figure out, I need more control, I need more power. So you can go from the absolute midpoints. I think like 50 pounds is generally quite a good, these days, starting string tension. And if you need more control, you string a little bit higher, you take it like by 1-2 pounds. And if you want a little bit more help, more depth, you string it lower. But small increments, the same when you add weight to the racket. Always do like by 2 grams, don't go 10 grams slapping on, because then you have no idea where the truth is, right? Like you're just going way two different directions. So start small and work from there, and don't overthink your equipment, which is weird to say on this channel, but it's actually the whole half of the point of the channel is to help you not overthink it. But we all get there. Good one. I hope you got some good information about strings, and it is important. It changes a lot. Like I've talked about it before on the channel. It's
quick
half
one.
the racket.
Dampener or no dampener? What's the difference?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a feel question and a sound question, right? So it doesn't really affect comfort so much, in my opinion. That's from what I've seen from the data. I can like both, but for me it's like depending a little bit on the racket. So if the racket has a lot of vibration, it's a pingy racket, like a metallic response, depending on the string, of course, then I prefer to get the dampener. If the racket feels pretty soft anyway, I can play without. So for me, that's the vibe I'm going for.
Does it increase the swing weight?
It does by 2 points, right? Is it 2 points?
2? Yeah, maybe. 1, maybe.
I think by depending on the rubber, but when I measured, usually it's like 2 points.
Okay, fair enough.
It's gonna be minimal, but you have to calculate that if you're really nerdy, really nerdy. But I don't even think about that, to be honest.
No. Good. Hopefully you found some interesting information. And if you see any questions, put them in the comments. Put them in the comments, and you won't get any replies, but you can put them there, and they will rest there forever. No, we're joking. But put your questions in the comments, and don't overthink it. But the string is half the racket, as we've said before. Yes. All right, that's it, guys. Yep. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and don't forget to play some tennis.